The envelope was already open when I saw it. My mother held it high under the chandelier at my brother's engagement dinner, tilting it so the check inside caught the light. "We've been saving this for something special," she announced, her voice trembling with the kind of pride she usually reserved for him. "$60,000 toward your dream restaurant, sweetheart." The table erupted. My brother grabbed her face and kissed both cheeks. My father raised his glass. Aunts and uncles clapped like they were witnessing a miracle, and I sat at the far end of the table, fork still in my hand, doing the math I'd been trained to do all my life, except this time, the numbers were about me. $60,000. That was almost exactly what I'd sent them over the past 6 years, month by month, transfer by transfer, while they told me they couldn't make ends meet. I set the fork down gently, lining it up with the edge of the plate, and smiled the way I'd been smiling my whole life with my teeth, never my eyes. I need to go back. Not far, just 6 years, to the kitchen of my old studio apartment, the one with the cracked tile by the stove and the window that never fully closed in winter. I was 24, fresh out of an accounting program I'd paid for myself because my parents told me they couldn't help with tuition. No resentment there, not then. I understood. My father drove delivery trucks and my mother worked reception at a dental clinic. Money was always a conversation that ended in silence. So, when my mother called one Tuesday evening, her voice thin and stretched like old elastic, and told me they were 3 months behind on rent, I didn't hesitate. I opened my laptop that same night, logged into my bank, and set up a recurring transfer, $800 a month. Not a fortune, but not nothing either, not when you're 24 and your own rent is due in 9 days. The first month stung, the second felt necessary. By the fourth, I stopped noticing. It became background noise, like traffic outside the window, constant, invisible, part of the architecture of my life. They never brought it up. My mother would sometimes mention how relieved she was that things were holding together, and I'd nod, sipping whatever was in my mug, not pointing out that things were holding together because I was holding them. My father never said a word about it, not once. I think he convinced himself the money just appeared, the way rain fills a gutter, no origin, no effort, just there. Meanwhile, my brother Derek lived in a different economy entirely. When he graduated high school, not college, high school, my parents threw a backyard party so loud the neighbors called in a noise complaint. There was a DJ, there was a rented photo booth, and at the end of the night, my father handed him an envelope with $2,000 and a note that said, "For your future." When I graduated high school 4 years earlier, my mother made a boxed cake, and my father shook my hand. When I finished my accounting degree, working nights at a warehouse to cover tuition, they mailed me a card with a $20 bill inside. My mother wrote, "So proud of you, honey." The exclamation point at the end felt like it was doing all the heavy lifting. I don't say this to be bitter. I say this because the pattern matters. Derek got celebration, I got acknowledgement. He was the spark, I was the fuse box. He was the story they told at parties. I was the reason the lights stayed on. It wasn't always money. Sometimes it was attention, proximity, patience. When Derek dropped out of community college to find himself, my parents nodded supportively and let him move back home rent-free for 2 years. When I mentioned I was struggling to cover both my rent and theirs in the same month, my mother said, "You've always been so resourceful, Marin, you'll figure it out." When Derek got a DUI at 21, my father hired a lawyer. When I asked them to co-sign a lease for a better apartment closer to work, they said they didn't want to take on the risk. The older I got, the less I tried to decode it. Some families have a sun and a shadow. I was the shadow. I moved through their lives doing useful, invisible things, filing their taxes, scheduling their doctor's appointments, setting up automatic payments on accounts they forgot existed. And every month, like clockwork, $800 left my account and arrived in theirs without ceremony, without thanks, without so much as a text that said "got it." So when my mother lifted that check at the engagement dinner and said $60,000, I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I did what I always did. I calculated 6 years times 12 months times $800. $57,600. Close enough to make my throat tighten. Close enough to understand that every dollar I'd sent to keep them afloat had been quietly pooled, repackaged, and handed to my brother under a chandelier while everyone clapped. I excused myself before dessert, told them I had an early meeting. My mother barely looked up, Derek was showing her photos of restaurant layouts on his phone, swiping through open kitchens and exposed brick like a kid flipping through a toy catalog. My father walked me to the door, squeezed my shoulder, and said, "Drive safe, kiddo," that was it. Joel was waiting in the car. He didn't ask how it went. He could see it on my face, not anger. Not yet. Just the flat stillness that comes when something you suspected all along is finally confirmed out loud. He turned the heat up and pulled onto the highway. I stared out the window and counted streetlights until the city blurred. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, hands folded, staring at the closet door like it owed me something. Joel brought me a glass of water and sat beside me. He didn't touch me. He just waited. That was the thing about Joel, he never rushed the silence. He trusted it the way some people trust words. "I'm done," I said. He nodded. Not surprised, not relieved, just present. The next morning, I canceled the transfer. I opened my banking app, navigated to the recurring payments tab, and pressed stop. A confirmation window appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled transfer?" I tapped yes without hesitating. The screen refreshed. The payment disappeared from the queue like it had never existed. 6 years of invisible labor erased in 2 taps. I set the phone down and made coffee. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. No calls, no texts. I almost convinced myself they hadn't noticed. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my mother's name lit up my screen. "Marin, the rent is past due. Did something happen with the bank?" "I stopped the payments, Mom." A long pause. I could hear the television in the background, some game show audience laughing. "What do you mean you stopped them?" "I mean, I'm not sending money anymore." Another pause. Longer this time. Then her voice shifted into the tone I knew too well, the one wrapped in guilt and delivered like a gift. "Marin, you know we depend on that. Your father's back has been acting up. I had to cut my hours last month. We can't just—" "You gave Derek $60,000. Silence. Real silence. Not the strategic kind. "That was different," she said quietly. "That was an investment in his future." "And what were my payments? What was that?" She didn't answer. I didn't wait for one. I told her I loved her, and I hung up. What followed was predictable if you've ever tried to leave a role your family assigned you at birth. My father called the next day, annoyed, speaking to me the way he spoke to customer service agents, clipped, impatient, certain the error was on my end. "Your mother's upset," he said, as if that were a legal summons. "You need to reconsider." I told him my decision was final. He said I was being selfish. I said I understood why he saw it that way. He hung up first. Derek called 2 days later, which surprised me. We rarely spoke directly. His voice was casual, almost rehearsed. "Hey, Mom and Dad told me what's going on. I think there's been a misunderstanding. That money they gave me, it's a loan. I'm paying it back once the restaurant turns a profit." I asked him when that would be. He said 12 to 18 months. I asked him if he'd signed anything. He laughed nervously and changed the subject. That told me everything. I blocked all 3 numbers that weekend. Not out of rage, out of preservation. I'd seen the cycle enough times to map it. Guilt, pressure, emotional escalation, a brief apology, then silence until the next ask. I couldn't afford another loop. Not financially, not emotionally, not in any currency I had left. Joel and I had recently closed on a small house on the east side of the city. Nothing extravagant, 2 bedrooms, a yard with a lemon tree, a garage that smelled like sawdust from the previous owner. But it was ours. Every wall, every payment, every coat of paint. I spent the first month after the purchase walking through the rooms in the morning before work, just feeling the floors beneath my feet. Ownership, not borrowed, not conditional, mine. 2 months after I cut the payments, Joel and I came home from a weekend trip to find something wrong. The side gate was unlatched. The back door was unlocked. And in the kitchen, sitting at our table like they'd been invited, were my parents. 2 suitcases stood near the hallway. My mother had made coffee using our machine. My father was reading a newspaper he must have brought himself, because we didn't get a subscription. "Before you say anything," my mother started, standing up with both palms raised. "Just hear us out." I didn't move from the doorway. Joel stepped in beside me, keys still in his hand. "We lost the apartment," she continued. "The landlord gave us 30 days and we couldn't find anything in time. Derek's restaurant isn't open yet, and he doesn't have room for us at his girlfriend's place. So we thought, You thought you'd move into my house without asking. We tried calling. You wouldn't answer. Because I blocked your numbers. My father set the newspaper down. This is family, Marin. You don't block family. I looked at him, really looked at the certainty in his face, at the complete absence of shame. He genuinely believed this was reasonable. That after years of taking from me without acknowledgement, after handing my contributions to someone else and calling it an investment, he could walk into my home with suitcases and expect a bedroom. You need to leave, I said. My mother's face crumpled. Marin, please. It's just temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month, until we figure something out. No. One word. Quiet, clean, final. It sat between us like a wall. My father stood up, pushing the chair back so hard it scraped the tile. This is ridiculous. After everything we've done for you, name one thing. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Joel spoke for the first time. I think you should gather your things. They didn't leave quietly. My mother cried in the doorway, asking me what kind of daughter turns her parents away. My father muttered that I'd regret this. They loaded the suitcases into the car with the slow, heavy movements of people who truly hadn't expected the word no. I stood at the kitchen sink, running water over the mug my mother had used, washing it until the heat turned my fingers pink. After they left, I changed the locks. Called a locksmith that same evening. Joel found one who could come within the hour. The old deadbolts came out. New ones went in, along with a keypad entry on the side gate. I updated the security cameras, added motion alerts to both our phones, and removed the spare key from the magnetic holder under the mailbox where my mother had found it. I did all of this calmly, methodically, the way I'd always done everything for them, except this time it was for me. The next 3 weeks were deceptively normal. I went to work. Joel cooked dinner. We painted the guest bedroom on a Saturday, turning it from builder's beige into a warm sage green. I started running in the mornings, short loops around the neighborhood, the lemon tree catching early light as I passed the yard. Life compressed into small, manageable rhythms. Then one evening, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security system. Front camera, motion detected. I opened the app and watched in real time as my mother walked up the driveway. She was alone. She tried the front door locked. She punched numbers into the new keypad, wrong code. She tried again, wrong. A third attempt triggered the alarm. The siren split the quiet neighborhood into sharp electric pieces. She stumbled back from the door, hands over her ears, looking around wildly as porch lights flicked on across the street. I was already on the phone with the security company. It's a false entry attempt. I know the person. She does not have access. Would you like us to dispatch police, ma'am? Yes. I said it without hesitating. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because boundaries only hold when you enforce them. A line that bends every time someone pushes isn't a line. It's a suggestion. Joel drove. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the city thin out into suburbs as we got closer to home. When we arrived, a patrol car was already parked by the curb. 2 officers stood near the porch. My mother sat on the steps, arms crossed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Ma'am, is this your mother? The officer asked. Yes. She says she was trying to visit. The alarm went off and she couldn't disarm it. She doesn't have the code. She doesn't have permission to enter. My mother looked up, eyes red. I just wanted to talk. I wasn't trying to break in. You were trying to enter a house you don't have access to. The officer glanced between us. Do you want to file a report? My mother's breath caught. I could feel the weight of the question, the gravity of what it meant. Filing a report against your own mother. I thought about it not for drama, not for revenge, but because I needed to know, for myself, whether I was willing to hold the line all the way. No report, I said, but she's not welcome on the property. If she returns without my permission, I will file one. The officer nodded and turned to my mother. Ma'am, you heard her. I'd recommend you don't come back unless invited. She stood slowly, brushing nothing off her jacket, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. You'll regret this, Marin, she said, not loudly, not with venom, just with the exhausted certainty of someone who truly believed the world would eventually realign in her favor. I didn't answer. I watched the officer walk her to the patrol car to drive her to the nearest bus stop. Her silhouette shrank in the side mirror until it disappeared entirely. Joel and I went inside. The alarm had reset. The house was exactly as we'd left it, dishes in the rack, sage green paint drying in the guest room, the faint scent of lemon from the candle I'd lit that morning. I locked the door behind us. The click was small, metallic, certain. 3 days later, my cousin Natalie called. She was the only person in the family who spoke to both sides without choosing one, and she was careful with her words. "Your parents went to Derek's place," she said. "They showed up with the suitcases again, asked to stay with him and his girlfriend." "And?" He said no. She paused. "His girlfriend told them the apartment was too small. Derek backed her up. Your mom cried on the sidewalk. Your dad called Derek ungrateful." I closed my eyes. There it was, the final piece. The golden child they'd poured everything into, the one who got the party and the check and the restaurant dream, had closed his door the same way they feared I would. Except I'd spent 6 years earning the right to say no. Derek had simply never been asked to say yes. "Where are they now?" I asked. "They found a room. Month-to-month rental near the bus depot. Your mom went back to full-time at the clinic. Your dad picked up weekend shifts." I thanked Natalie and hung up. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something closer to clarity, the quiet recognition that the world hadn't ended because I stopped carrying people who never noticed the weight. 2 weeks later, a voicemail appeared from an unknown number. My mother's voice, thinner than I remembered, stripped of its usual authority. She said she understood now, not everything, she admitted, but enough. She said she was sorry for the way they'd shown up at the house. She said Derek's restaurant had stalled, that the $60,000 was mostly gone, spent on permits and renovations that hadn't passed inspection. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to visit. She just said she hoped we could talk someday. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back. Some apologies need distance before they can be received. Not days, maybe not even weeks. The kind of distance measured in healed nerve endings and rebuilt trust, the kind that doesn't run on a schedule. That Saturday morning, I stepped into the backyard with my coffee. The lemon tree had started to fruit small green globes clustered near the lower branches, not ripe yet, but present. Joel was inside making breakfast, the sound of a spatula scraping a pan drifting through the open window. The sun sat low, spilling gold across the grass in long, unhurried strokes. I pulled out my phone and opened the property listing app. Our house photos loaded the sage green guest room, the updated kitchen, the yard with the lemon tree catching the morning light. I didn't list anything. I just looked at it. The way you look at something you've built with your own hands, something no one gave you, something no one can take back. I closed the app and sat down on the porch step. The coffee was warm. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere down the street, a sprinkler ticked in lazy circles. People think boundaries are walls. They think saying no is an act of war, but it's not. A boundary is just the shape of your self-respect made visible. It's the line between what you carry because you choose to and what you refuse to carry because someone assumed you would. For 6 years, I carried everything without being asked and without being thanked. I became the invisible architecture of a family that couldn't see me even when I was the only thing holding them up. And when I finally stopped, when I set the weight down and straightened my spine, the silence that followed wasn't absence. It was the sound of a life becoming my own. If you've ever been the one who held everything together while everyone else celebrated someone else, you're not alone. And it's okay to stop,